Brian, how's it going, buddy?
Hey, Jeff. Great to be back on the Kessel chat. Really
Oh,
excited
man.
see all the viewers and of course get a weekly dose of talking about Star Wars.
Absolutely. I mean, what else would we want to do with our weeks? Especially the night before no meeting day at work, which is freaking fantastic. Because it means the evening wraps up, go grab an adult beverage, and be like, I feel complete for the week. Now tomorrow's just going to be icing on the cake.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a great way to kind of lead into that kind of, yeah, what is it, NMF, no meeting Friday.
I love it.
Where we're able to just kind of take a little bit of a different approach to the workday. But
I know.
I love being able to get through this part of the week and then being able to jump right into a nice Star Wars chat.
Yeah,
So
I totally
and
do.
if Rich is on, I got the timer to when I'll get to me bringing up a Star Trek thing. I've got it right here. I'm going to try to go as long as I can without bringing up a Trek thing. Because I'm keeping my eye on it this time.
That's funny. He's going to miss it, too. I mean, oh, shoot, I just messed up our show. I apologize. Hang on one sec. I was trying to fix our, there we go. I needed to get the right wording there at the top above you where it says the Leia the Jedi Master. Should have done that heads up. We were just talking about yeah, exactly. We were just talking about process and like making the time to get our show ramped and prepped to go. You know, it goes off pretty well every week, but we both want to like dedicate a bit more time to just just dial it in a little bit more because we have awesome news, like super awesome news. Do you want to tell everyone in the news who's watching?
You actually shared it with me, and it was like one of the things that like absolutely made my day. You got me so pumped over this. I feel like because you are also the founder of the Kessel Chat, this is definitely some Jeff Bull news. Jeff, please share it with the viewers here.
This is like the coolest thing. So I don't want to like bury the lead too much. I was on a call earlier this week, and we have a program at Cisco that it's the Cisco High School Externship Program, or I think the full name is the Cisco High STEM Externship Program. So it's basically bringing in students from all over the country that are in various STEM-based education programs, and they're all high school students. Bringing them in as an externship, so they get to learn some skills. They go through a cohort for a few weeks. They do all kinds of sessions with them. Then they actually do this capstone project where they give them a topic, and throughout the course of like a 2-week period, they have to hammer through this topic and give a big presentation with all kinds of research and data, and it's just brilliant. I participated a couple times now, and the students are just phenomenal. Like, you hear the stuff that they come up with, and you're like, I was not thinking like this when I was 17 years old or 18 years old. Like, my brain was, maybe I had enough attention for Magic the Gathering, but that was about it. The last time I did this, the students were just fantastic. Anyway, I was invited to talk to them on, I think it was Tuesday. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Tuesday, and present about what is DevNet and just talk it through. And it turned into just sort of a like life advice and career advice, and talking about what it was like to, be younger and go through your career and all these things. It was just a great conversation. And while we were on it, someone made a comment saying in the chat saying, "Oh, he's on YouTube," and I saw it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, my Ryan and I, a friend of mine here from work, we do this Star Wars show." I'm like, yeah, it's really cool you found that. And a couple moments later, someone said, "Oh, great sub count." I'm like, "Great sub count." And they're like, it's as I said this, people in the chat are saying in WebEx, like, "Oh yeah, you're up over 100 subscribers now." And we were at 85 on two. I'm like, "Wait, what?" And by the time I looked later in the day, I think we're at like 139 or 140 now. So these students awesome. Liked what we did. We had a ton of Star Wars fans in it, which was great. I wasn't expecting that. And they flooded it, and they showed us some love, and we're at, I don't know, I haven't checked in a little bit, but we're at probably 140 subscribers now. So huge thank you to everybody out there that like jumped on and likes what we do. And that's why we do it. I mean, we do it because Brian and I love sitting here talking about Star Wars and the myth and the stories and just everything in the background. But, it's awesome that people like watching us do this too. That's kind of rad.
Yeah, I mean, again, I feel the exact same way you feel, Jeff. I want to thank everybody that's watching us right now, everybody that watches us, in time shifted modes. Honestly, big thanks to Jeff for coming up with this idea and getting it off the ground. And I'm sure that my household thanks you too, Jeff, because now instead of just my wife having to hear me talk about, they could have done episode 2 a little differently, and Naboo really should have been Alderaan. Now I get to share this with the.
You're like, honey, the Duel of the Fates. World. We need to have a conversation about the Duel. And she's like, oh my God, stop talking about this.
No, so the wider world now gets to engage with all of these ideas, and we're so happy to have so many of you here watching, and always like so exciting to like just sit down and just talk about Star Wars, which is something that we're very passionate about. One thing though that I always think is really cool, Jeff, is that a lot of these conversations, when we start them, always go in different avenues. And for everybody to kind of have some background on this, and for those of you who are maybe doing podcasts or videos like this, one of the things that I have found that's great is in our green room, and this happens a lot, where Jeff and I are talking before the show, we are working out the boundaries. We're trying, okay, this is the stuff that we're going to just try to stay within. And then pretty much like 10 minutes in, that goes right out the window.
Just gone.
And what's fun though is that it becomes very natural. It allows us we are still able to stay on topic, but allows these conversations to be great. And I feel like that's where we kind of hit on really great things. And I would say that anyone else is looking to do the same thing. Let your magic happen. It's great when it starts to move off of certain points. But it's always great that we do kind of come out here with a theme every single week, and then we try to like stick to it as long as we can. And then I inevitably will bring up something that is totally off topic. And Jeff does the good work of reeling me back in.
I feel like it's a Monty Python episode and now for something completely different, and we just change things. Let's move on to something else. I know it's, I think that's, for me, that's always been the most fun about doing live stream videos, is that, when you do sort of evergreen or recorded video, edited video, I guess is the best way to say it. And those are amazing. There's so much like legit Star Wars content out that's like that. There's also a lot of good Star Wars live streams too. My favorite part about doing the live is we're going to flub and make mistakes, and we're going to go down rabbit holes, and we may not stay on topic, but it's just a conversation. So what hopefully what the audience is getting from the two of us is more of, hey, if we were all sitting in the bar and sitting having a couple beers and shooting the breeze about Star Wars, you're just going to hear us having a conversation. And hopefully it's an interesting conversation to listen to. And that's what kind of translates here. And conversations, as we all know, don't just go in a linear path. That's not how our brains work. That's not how we process ideas. It's not just the same thing over and over again. You go off in tangents and then you come back, and that's what makes it a conversation. It's what makes good stories what they are, is you don't just follow a straight path. There are variations and branches you go off in a story, but you always come back to a central place at the end of it, hopefully.
Exactly. Sometimes you go to Canto Bight for a little while, then you come back.
Exactly.
But I will say, I think, Jeff, what would be really fun is, before every episode, I sit down and make a bunch of notes. And I always think I should take a picture of this, because we get to about like 10 or 20% of the things that I'm like, oh yeah, like I should really bring this up. Like this will be a good thing to bring up. And every time we get down there, I'm always like, I'm so glad. Like, it was fun to put the notes together. I'll put pictures of them and I'll put them on Twitter so that way people can see this stuff. But I'm so glad where we ultimately end up. It's always like, it is always like kind of like a fun journey as to like how we ultimately get to where we go in a lot of these talks. But I always think it would be fun to say, like, show like when we did the big discussion on myths with Joanna, or even the hero's journey, which I think was the week before. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. I mean, I was like studious. I could have had a binder with, sheet protectors and this is what we can cover this. But it was so great that, it ended up just kind of becoming a talk. Mm-hmm. And big thanks to Joanna Gardner, who was on our episode last week, where we were able to get kind of into the mythos of Star Wars. I'm looking forward to not just seeing Joanna come back, but a lot of potential future guests. And we're very thankful that we have so many people that are now interested in what we're doing. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jonah, the three of us have talked, or the two of us have talked with Joanna, and she's absolutely interested in coming back and talking at length about other topics too. So we're going to work on getting some scheduling set up with her soon, hopefully. And in addition, we've had, I know you have, and I've had a couple conversations with folks on various social media platforms who are very interested in also being on the show, who they love Star Wars too, but they've never really participated in something like this. And I've in interacting them with, like, on Instagram or Twitter, I've asked, I'm like, I finally got out of my own way, instead of like, well, you can kind of see the sign right there. I usually overthink the crap out of it, and I'm like, I spin in circles for like 2 or 3 days, and then I don't end up doing anything. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to ask. And I asked this person recently, and that the person I asked was like, oh my gosh, I would love to be on a show. I've never even thought about that. I'm like, excellent. This will be a person who comes on and just wants to geek out about all the same things we do, and it'll be another set of rabbit holes, and that'll be fun. It'll just be a conversation, and it'll be great.
Awesome. That is and it's so great. One of the things too, and this is just a call out to our viewers as people are watching the show. If you've got a topic that you would like us to cover in Star Wars, or Star Wars related items, we're really eager to kind of hear your news back. Also, as a fellow Modestan, this is just a call out to George Lucas. We were born not that far apart from each other, George. If you'd like to come on the show, we can make the time. I always think that it's so funny. I'm a big George Lucas fan, whether it's Star Wars or even earlier films. I'm a huge American Graffiti fan just because that's Modesto. But it's great to have guests, and we can make the time if George wants to come on.
Absolutely, and we'll even extend that. We'll even extend that out to Dave Filoni or even John Favreau. If either, Dave, John, if either of you, it's no problem. If either of you just want to take a couple minutes, we don't have to come out and meet. It's all online. You can just jump on. I'll give you a link. It's no big deal. Or, I mean, if it's easier, Ryan's out in Sacramento. I'm in the East Bay. We're happy to drive out to Skywalker Ranch. That's, Mill Valley. That area is not that far away. It's no big deal. Just call us. No big deal.
I'm not gonna lie, Jeff. We could do an episode on the journey that I took trying to get hired at Skywalker Ranch.
We should totally do that. This,
and I like can't believe it. But there was this time where I was like, I am 100% going to work there, and it is a journey. It's an effort. It ends in tragedy, as a lot of stories do. But it ultimately worked out in that I'm still, of course,
that just means that your hero's journey has not completed yet. You're still working through it. See, it's a long game. It's a long game.
I'm kind of in an episode 4 of a 6-part series. I'm gonna get there. But speaking of episodes and heroes' journeys, we actually have a really cool topic today. It's right above me, right here. And this is actually a topic that you came up with, Jeff.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this. We've talked about subjects similar to this in the past, where in the vein of the hero's journey, or various like quote unquote heroes within Star Wars. There's so many of them, so many that are obvious because they've been put in movies or TV shows or what have you, but just as many of them that are not obvious or that are out there that could use some more introspection. Let's look at them more deeply. And I think we got even more of a taste of that. Like, it's been talked about in what was pre-canon, or what's called Legends now. Leia had a whole history of being trained by not just her brother, but being partially at his Jedi Academy and having at least 2 different masters who trained her, and she became like the first Jedi in the New Jedi Council with the New Republic era. I mean, there was a whole backstory in Legends. But in the modern canon, now that Disney owns them, she is Force sensitive. We knew that going into it. We had that idea that she was Force sensitive, but they touched on it directly in The Rise of Skywalker when she talks, and they show a cutscene in the movie of her being trained by her brother, and arguably is a pretty powerful Jedi, but she has an issue with her son, and she's worried, so she gives up that life. But we thought, like, what would have happened if she not just continued that training, but even more so, if we flipped the script here and went back to the beginning, and it wasn't Luke that was found by Obi-Wan or anyone else, that Leia was the one who was found out, and she was the one who's picked up on this. What would have happened if she became the Jedi Master and Luke had not? And he hadn't been trained. He stayed on Tatooine for a while, maybe came into the story later on. What would that look like?
Yeah.
I'm really excited about talking about that.
No, and I mean, I almost feel like there is a and by the way, I can answer that question. Do either of you play Star Wars Battlefront? Yes, this is another odd Star Wars connection. I bought the R2D2 C3PO Xbox. Which is actually sitting like right off camera. I should put it behind me. The Xbox is actually colored like R2D2, and I'm a huge video game person already, and when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm crazy Star Wars person, so I gotta get this. And a big fan of Battlefront. I even remember there was I'm sorry I'm answering this question, I'm diverting here, but it's a great one. I remember Battlefront. Those were great days playing that, and I remember they used to even have like big LAN setups at like gaming centers where you could play that. It was so cool. But to get to your point too about Leia being that Jedi, being that person that was selected, I actually think that you could almost say that the kernel of the sequel trilogy is built around there, which is you've got this duality, you've got these co-protagonists, Luke and Leia. And very similarly to how you have in their case a protagonist and an antagonist, which is Rey and Kylo Ren, and Rey and Ren, Luke and Leia, and you have what could have been if maybe Leia would have been the child that Obi-Wan takes and drops off Harry Potter style at the Lars homestead. I often think though, just like you were saying, like, in in Empire Strikes Back, Luke flies off to Cloud City, and Obi-Wan says that boy is our only hope, and Yoda says, no, there is another. And I always think about, well, what if, like, here you have Leia, she's grown up on Alderaan, Bail Organa knows her background. I mean, he was there. And he's able to say, oh, hey, like, by the way, we should totally make sure that, she has Jedi training, or we should find ways to be able to help kind of build these natural skills that she has. And then maybe she's in a better position to save the galaxy, so to speak. I always think that would be a really interesting story, and if Luke had been the other. And again, I think the kernel of that really comes. You see that in what happens with Rey. Whether Leia goes with Bail Organa to Alderaan, which seemed like the better deal of the two, to be honest.
If
Alderaan,
we're being honest.
If we're being honest, why they split them up? Okay, fine, we got to split them up. But seriously, it feels like Leia got the better end of this deal. She's a literal princess, and then grows up in what looks like, the Sierras, a planet built of Tahoe, and then Luke has to live on this dirt farm. I mean, I guess it's good that he becomes the Jedi. I guess maybe that's the trade-off. Like, well, you get to be the Jedi because you grew up on the dirt farm. But yeah, I think it would have been a really interesting story if she would have been the Jedi.
I agree. I I have read a few of the. So I actually just finished reading. I was laughing, not just because what you were saying is objectively hilarious, but I was reading Kenobi recently, which was a pretty canon book that was written, but it's amazing. It's a story of Obi-Wan just dropped off Luke on the planet, and he's trying to get settled in, and he deals with like a bunch of shenanigans on the planet for a while, and try to figure out how to actually live in exile by himself and not get into like problems and situations he's got to work his way out. Anyway, before that, I had actually listened to the audiobook of, I forget the name of it. It's about Leia specifically in the New Republic, post-galactic crash. She's a senator. The government's up. Mon Mothma is the Supreme Chancellor. And she is, I think it's called Bloodlines. Yeah, it's Bloodlines, where she's discovered at the end of it to be, by the Senate to be Darth Vader's daughter. And she has to resign and walk away from her senatorial duties. But when you listen to it and you listen to how the story is told about the person that she is, what I've always wondered is how would A New Hope had played out had she been the one who was, got into the situations, who was learning some from Obi-Wan and all that, because she had already shown that she had diplomacy skills, she had great communication skills. She could read a room a hell of a lot better than Luke could. Like, she grew up in this royal family, but her father was, the king essentially, but he was also the senator for a long time for Alderaan in the Senate. And he knew how to build these coalitions and how to work with these people and how to do. And so she was being trained for that as well. And it strikes me as her having less of a juvenile mind when coming into the Jedi training than Luke did. And she probably could have adapted to it much better, and not have been so, what we see in Luke in Return of the Jedi is different than what we see in Empire, but even Empire feels like still almost like he just came off, finished working on a vaporator and he came on and now he's got a lightsaber in his hand and he's swinging it around. Because you watch his fighting style and you watch his approach to things. He's like haphazard. He's still running into stuff. He's questioning everything. I think she would have questioned things in a particular way, but would have also accepted, because she understood that there's some things you need to accept and go with because she was in politics. So like there's some things on the outside you just accept and you deal with because there's something else about a question here, but this isn't the right time to ask those questions. He didn't have that. He had almost no filter. A very immature way of approaching things because he grew up in a way that he wasn't around a lot of people and he was still very much a kid at heart.
Yep.
I don't know. It really gets me thinking about how would that movie end? I mean, it almost would have been like that movie ended. Cool. There's nothing else to tell here because she just crushed it, and she would not have been in the situation with Palpatine and, in my opinion, in Return of the Jedi that we see Luke in later on. Like, that would not have played out that way.
Oh, no, totally. I mean, she's got capability, she's got agency, but you're absolutely right. She's got seriousness. And I just keep thinking of, people will say that The Force Awakens is kind of like a soft reboot of the original Star Wars. And you can almost see that in the capturing of Rey, and then how she is able to free herself. And I almost wonder about again, you have someone who's serious. You have someone who's standing up to Darth Vader. You've got someone who, was saying, oh, of course, of course, General Tarkin, like standing up to Tarkin, this crazy guy who's like totally threatening. And and even though she's been taken capture, she is just like got all of this facility, she's got all of this agency, she's telling them what to do, she's taking charge. And it's like, oh, and I understand that for you and I right now, we're also doing a little bit of like backwards rear view window kind of fixing, because obviously George isn't thinking at the time like, oh hey, these are Jedi twins, because that probably would have changed a couple things in Empire in that hospital scene.
Yeah, just a couple other little things we probably should retcon.
Exactly. It's like, oops, maybe that kiss for good luck, let's wind that one back. But I will say that if you think of Leia as being force sensitive, then it's really so different than the maturity level of Luke. I mean, Leia is so put together, like as far as her personality and what she wants when we meet her in Star Wars. And you compare that to Luke, who, all he wants to do is go to Tashi Station and pick up power converters. He wants to fool around with his friends.
I just want to shoot some womp rats in my T-16, man. That's all I want to do.
By the way, if you knew someone who was like, look, that's my favorite thing to do is to drive around and shoot at small defenseless animals, you might be like, oh, maybe
we're not friends anymore.
Keep that to yourself, friend. But and then when Obi-Wan dies, this guy, he barely knows. He's distraught. I can't believe Ben's dead. Princess Leia's planet has blown up, and she's comforting Luke. She is serious, Mm-hmm. And I just think you give a character like maybe it's a problem of her being overpowered. I almost wonder sometimes, because it's like I'm sure you're familiar with, there's a Batman storyline where Batman gets the Green Lantern ring. And that's it's you overpower the Batman when that happens. Maybe a Leia that is also a Jedi Master in Star Wars is like, well, then it's a 15-minute movie. It's like, oh, we're going to deliver you to the hands of the Emperor. And it's like, oh no, the Emperor is going to be delivered to me. Maybe she's just too much of a badass if she's a Jedi Master too at that time.
I mean, very likely. One of the times I was just thinking about this, one of the times that I think speaks to the nuance behind who Leia is as a mm-hmm. person, as a character, an arc in the story is, a single word. One word she utters at the very end of Rogue One, when the situation has happened, the Alderaanian shuttle is taken off, or the cruiser, the diplomatic cruiser is taken off from the Star Destroyer. We see Vader, and then that person who has the Death Star plans runs into the cabin, the main cabin, doors open, princess, or whatever he says, here you go, and she looks at it, and he goes, what is it? And she just says, hope. Yeah. That's it. And she looks off into like, as they're going into hyperspace, she looks off and she says hope. And I think in that word, for me, the way the actress portrayed her at that moment and the way that she said hope told me she is seeing like 4 or 5 different layers of this game. And she's already like playing chess in her mind of what this means. And she knows that this means hope to a lot of people. It's not so much that anything happens with it immediately. It's that they have it and they got to this place and people did something that can inspire so much change in others. Like, well, if they could do this, well then hell, what am I doing? I could go do something. And like, if you're building a rebellion or building a coalition or building a cause, you need somebody like that who can see around those corners or see the few steps ahead in a couple different directions. And she clearly, by saying just that word hope in that situation, tells you, I think, everything you need to know about who she is as a character. Then you put a lightsaber in her hands, and more than that, you give her force powers and the ability to not just sense the force, but use her innate ability without the force to be able to sense how people are going to react, why they'll react that way, how they'll deal with the situation, the emotions they're going to go through, how to comfort them. Yep. And then you give her the ability to literally feel that vibration throughout the force itself. I mean, she becomes basically a Star Wars medium. I don't even say someone who can read minds, because it's not reading minds. It's reading the vibrations of people and realizing that this is how they're going to react to a situation. I can completely change how I deal with the situation based off of that. Luke had nothing like that. Maybe later in life, maybe later in Return of the Jedi, he acquired that. We don't get to know much about that other than in Legends. We don't get that from the movie. We're kind of like we kind of have to just assume it. And it kind of breaks down there at the very end where the Emperor messes with his mind and he sees his friends getting hurt and he like embraces his hate for a minute and fights his father. Like you kind of see it break down right there, because I don't think Leia would have done that. I don't think she would. I think she'd have the fortitude to be like, no, I'm not going to be baited by your teasing me with my father and taking my lightsaber and showing me there's nothing you can do to stop your friends. And she would have been like, well, some of them have to deal with that. I'm going to move on because I got to do what I got to do. Not sacrificing her friends, but she wouldn't have just fallen into the emotional trap that the Emperor laid right in front of her feet, like Luke did.
Yeah, I think that it's possibly a little bit easier to manipulate Luke. Leia is even though Leia knows that, because Luke's able to say, do you have memories of your mother, your real mother? So Leia knows, she's adopted. But I feel like Luke has a little bit more of potential manipulation there, just because Luke has been successfully lied to for so long. And so he's a little bit more here he's been brought up by people, of course, who love him, but are telling him, oh, your father was just the navigator on a spice freighter. And when he died. And then Obi-Wan starts telling him, oh, no, your dad was a Jedi. And then this other guy, Vader, killed him. And then Yoda doesn't tell him about his sister until he's about to die. There is a thing that I think makes Leia actually a very strong, capable character, and that's because so many people, with the exception of telling her who her true parentage is, so many people are telling her the truth. Whether it's Bail Organa, who's telling her the truth about the way that the galaxy works. And I think that's what makes her such a strong character against someone like Darth Vader. Darth Vader's coming onto her ship and it's like, you weren't on any mercy mission this time. And instead she's like, she is just talking like, spitting fire at everybody, right? But I feel like that's because she has all of this truth that she's standing on. Whereas Luke's foundation is like a mound of sand. Like Luke doesn't know who he is, where he's from, or even what his role is in these things. And every time he thinks he knows, something pulls the rug out from underneath him. Whether it's thinking that he knows what he's supposed to do and grow up on Tatooine, and then of course he's got to leave with Obi-Wan. Whether it's going to Yoda, thinking I'm looking for a powerful Jedi master, a great Jedi warrior, and then getting schooled by Yoda, and even thinking, oh, I know what the Force is. It's like what Rey says, the Force allows you to move rocks with your mind. Like all of these things, all of these rug pulls that keep happening to Luke, I think it makes him more manipulable, or if that's the word to use, versus Leia, who is like grounded and strong and knows exactly where she is. I mean, that's why she's able to do like crazy awesome things, like save Luke on Cloud City. Mm-hmm. She tells Chewie to turn back. That is one of my favorite scenes when Luke reaches out in the Force. And he doesn't even know why he can reach Leia, but he's able to reach Leia and reach out to the Force. When Leia tries desperately to save Han, when she ultimately kills Jabba the Hutt, these are, and then of course, even on Endor, she's just this incredibly brave, self-assured character. Does not have some of these, I don't know, kind of character issues that you can see in especially Luke that make him vulnerable.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, and no, nothing hard on Luke. Like he's a good character, and there's that struggle that comes along with having to overcome, like you said, so many people deceiving you for so long successfully. Yeah. I love this idea though of Leia, because in that scene you're talking about, outside of Bespin, out of Cloud City on Bespin, and they're flying away. Not only does she Luke, like you're Leia, yeah. Luke, she does it. Not only that, but she's like, turn around. And when they're like, we can't do that, she's like, turn around. And she's like, there is no question in her mind. She's like, something just happened. I get it. Like, because who receives a vision or a feeling is like, well, I kind of think I need to go back. Do you really just turn around and like hard hit the brakes, get off the freeway, and immediately turn around? No, you question it most people question it for a bit and try to figure out, how would I do this? And she's like, nope, do it. Get back there.
Turn around.
Let's go.
Lando, get on the top hatch.
And Lando's at first like, what are you talking? And she looks at Chewie. She's like, Chewie, and he's like, he does it, and Lando's all right, cool, we're good. I'll turn around.
So there's all of these like cool things. Someone in the chat brought up a Battlefront, and one of the things that's really cool is there's actually been some video games that actually took this as an alternate universe item. And if I'm right, I can't remember if it's the Force Unleashed 1 or 2. But in some of the side quests that you can play as the apprentice, one of them, of course, is Luke falling to the dark side on Hoth. But one of them is you've defeated Luke, and it's Leia that's been trained. And if I'm right, you fight a Jedi Leia on Endor.
That's Galen Merrick, right?
Yes,
you're playing the character Galen Merrick, and you have to go there and fight. Okay, and he's a pretty powerful like dark side user anyway at that point, I think.
Yes, yes, he is, and at that point, it is a pretty it's a pretty rough moment because you're having to fight Leia. It is a really cool idea. Also, and I don't know if this was intentional. Spoilers for both the Force Unleashed and the Rise of Skywalker. Leia, and again, someone in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong. Leia has a yellow lightsaber in the Force Unleashed, while also having a Rey has a yellow lightsaber in the Rise of Skywalker. So a nice little callback. Yeah. I will also say some of the way that the character is dressed in the Force Unleashed is actually very similar to how Rey is costumed in Rise of Skywalker. I'm just actually thinking of this now. That was probably by design.
And another fun, interesting connection there. If you think back to the Clone Wars, and then you think of Rebels, and the 2 times we ever see Jedi Temple Guards on Coruscant.
Yep.
Both times, yellow lightsabers, dual bladed. They're not. It's not really a lightsaber. It's actually a different variant because the middle section's much longer with shorter endpoints. But it's like a pike almost. But they're yellow as well, indicating a different form, like a different connection to the Force. Because when Jedi they get their kyber crystal, it doesn't inherently have a color to it. It's a crystal, and they based off of their what they do to the lightsaber when they make it and how they utilize the Force, whether it's something like a guardian or a sentinel or a different form, they would take on different colors based off of how they sort of like interact with the Force. So yeah, it's really interesting to see a correlation between not just Leia but then Rey and Temple Guards, and it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, what is what are the qualities that a Temple Guard would have, this specialized thing in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant and other temples that Leia also has, or would have had, had that played out even further?
No, I would have loved to have seen that. I would have loved to have seen Leia's lightsaber be yellow. I understood the idea of having having them both have those blue lightsabers at the end. I think it would have actually been really cool. I loved that Rey had that yellow lightsaber at the end. I thought that was a really cool introduction there. The only time you really see a lot of those types of yellow lightsabers are things in like video games or in some of the animated series. I remember one of the first times I saw a yellow lightsaber was in actually the original action figure. I want to say Luke's lightsaber was yellow. But one of the other times that you can see it is like in Jedi Power Battles with Plo, and he's got a yellow lightsaber, and yeah, exactly. And I love the use of that. Honestly, though, because we're talking about crystals, makes me think of dilithium crystals on Star Trek. Rich, that's for you. I made it 41 minutes. 41 minutes, and there's your Star Trek reference. But yeah, I will say that I would have loved to have seen more of that. Yeah, and honestly, it would have been great. I know that unfortunately for the. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh no! I was just clearing my throat, but Joanna is actually in the show watching too, which is awesome. Joanna, thanks for being here. And she posted this question, which is a slight variant on some of the things we've been talking about, which is who is Leia in that alternate world? Like, who is the person? How does she behave? All that. But I think this is a really interesting variant on the topic we're already talking about, which is not just who the person is and how she would have interacted with the world, but what would her arc have been? How would the story have actually been different had she been that Jedi?
I still think you get the reaction of having, because Star Wars is still a family story. And honestly, some of the greatest stories are like when you look at the original Star Wars, it's a lot of what appears to be strangers. And I always find that my favorite stories are ones that, as the story starts to become more and more refined, you start realizing certain interconnections between those characters, or you find out more about those characters' histories, and that makes the stakes get more personal.
Mm-hmm.
And in Return of the Jedi, when Luke says, "Hey, do you have memories of your mother, your real mother?" And Leia, of course, is the only one of them that has these memories of their mother, which I think it's the pitch meeting guy who says, impossible baby memories. So Leia has these memories of her mother, of her being very beautiful and kind, but sad. And Luke says, "I don't have any memories of my mother." And then but then says then Luke, Luke says, "I need to tell you about the Force is strong in my family, Darth Vader is my father," and basically says, "You're my sister." But when she hears that Darth Vader is Luke's father, she looks at him with such disgust, like, he's your father? And I think that is a really interesting character arc, which is to coming to the truth of one's kind of past and kind of dealing with that. I think you could still have a really great arc of Leia coming to terms with this person whom she's loved and thought of as her father, Bail Organa, having to deal with the fact that Bail's not told her the truth and what that really means in in a personal relationship, having to come to terms that this incredibly evil person that has tortured you is in fact your father, and what that means for what that means for the universe, coming to terms. It's like what Luke even has to deal with Ben, I can't kill my own father. He says that after his dad cut his hand off. I think that is an important story, and possibly, to Joanna's question, the character arc is one of not only reconciliation for the galaxy, which is how all these things have happened and now we have to get them back right, but reconciliation and kind of like righting the ship for a person, how to make this right for Leia, and how she can then kind of recapture the truth. I think that could really work well as a story.
Yeah, I like a lot about what you just described, and something that got me thinking about is this idea. We've seen it or read it in other stories where there's sort of this distinction made between someone's it could be maternal or paternal, but let's just say father in this case. The distinction between father and dad, where like in a story where we've seen movies about this and TV shows, and we've read books where a child that's raised knowing they're adopted has their dad or their mom, even if someone else is their actual father, the father of them, the person who created them, this person that they've lived with, that's their dad. That person is their dad. And I think so for me, that's an interesting part of that is, to your point, she's like, she probably still, even once she learns that Vader is her actual father, she probably would have that same reaction, even if it sounds a little different, because in her mind, I don't care who actually, made me as a baby with, my mom. Bail is my dad. The person I know, the person who raised me, who made me who I am, is my dad. And that's the person right over here. That's the father. Oh man, that person, she would still feel the same and still very much be able to externalize that, I think, and allow that to not cloud her decisions and her judgment for what the plan needs to be to still approach the Empire and still do what she believes she needs to get done, which is, I think, alongside what you said, makes the potential for that story so much more rich, in my opinion, than what we see with Luke. Not that Luke's arc is bad, but there's more richness, because with Luke, it's we have to focus on the black and white of he's going after the main bad people. That's the story. That's what we see, and it's great. It's a family thing. There's a simple arc that gets to the end. It's still enjoyable to read, but the circle to get to the conclusion isn't super complex. There's not a lot of hops that have to happen or conclusions that you couldn't just draw because like, yeah, this is how it's going to play out. But with Leia, I think that arc would end up being, that story would actually be told a very different way, because to your point, if we tried to approach it the same way as they did with Luke, it's a 15-minute movie and it's done, because she's not going to let any of that stuff cloud her. She's going to move on and be done. So what else would happen? Well, what would happen is all this other strategy. Now that she has these other capabilities, she would use the nuance of those in her strategies, and she probably would have not just taken down the Empire, but done it in a much more finalic way than what we actually saw, and have a plan for what to do with it right afterwards, and have known that plan and been prepped for that plan. I think she would at least have the capability to go with that, which means the introduction of things to disrupt that in the story, which you need to have on that journey, would be almost even more dastardly, to be honest, because to break up her abilities in the Force and her thoughtfulness, thinking ahead and working her surroundings and building, like, what you need to break that up is something that is even more destructive and more disruptive, because that's a lot of power to give a character. If you're going to break that up in a story, you're going to have to do it really, really. There's a wedge that has to get shoved in there that is really, really bad or really hard for her to deal with. Like somebody major dying in the story, like her brother dying. Oh, you are the last one. Crap. Now I can't take as many chances, or now I have to be more careful about what I was doing. Something like oh, so Luke died, or somebody else died that was super close to her, that, killing off Han right as she started to form a relationship with him, just starts to really disrupt and challenge all the things she's like. Something like that would have to happen. I think that would be really interesting, because it would make it a much more, I don't want to say adult, but a more mature story than what we saw originally.
Yep. Yeah, because I think the story of Luke is watching literally a farm boy come into a larger, vision of the galaxy. I think what is interesting about Leia is it's actually a blending of two kind of standard stories that you have. One where you have a character standing on what they think is firm ground and is in fact a lie. And that is, when Vader says, Obi-Wan should have told you about your father, you told me enough. He told me you killed him. See, Luke's fighting Vader the whole time, and I know that we've talked about this, Jeff, like endlessly. Like that sequence is Luke's like, I'm fighting the man that killed my father. I'm fighting the man that killed Obi-Wan Kenobi. I am getting vengeance. I am bringing justice. Maybe that's what Luke wants to think, but it's really vengeance. Mm-hmm. And he told me enough. He told me you killed him. And then Vader says, no, I am your father. And that is a destructive moment for Luke, because and we've talked about this, which is a great moment for a lot of characters is when you have the lie that your character believes in. Right. And the lie that Luke believes in is that he is this light in the darkness that's so different from Vader, and that he's avenging these wrongs that have been brought to his family, when in fact the apple doesn't fall that far from the tree. Leia is totally different in that moment, if that happens, where Leia is, one, a diplomat first. She's an organizer. She is a politician. She knows how to deal and handle with other powerful people, just like herself. She's a senator. So she has all of this agency, right? In that moment, if she is confronting Vader, maybe not even with a lightsaber, it's one that is around saying, I am in the right, because I look at all of this foundation of truth that I stand on. Me and all the things that I stand for can't be anything like you. And then to hear, no, I'm your father, that undermines the trust that she's had in her own adoptive father, Bail Organa. That starts to have the same type of question that Luke has, but in a much different way. Instead of Luke thinking, "Whoa, am I? How am I avenging? Who am I avenging myself upon?" In this case, it calls into question how far am I how far away am I removed from this very evil person, and why have these other people kind of lied to me. It shakes her foundation in a very different way, and I wonder that if instead it was a sword fight, which of course is great. The other kind of classic story that you're seeing here with Leia is it's a coming home story. It's a reconciliation story that happens when a character comes home and has to deal with a trauma that has happened in the past. And that is a really maybe and now maybe that is more of a Star Trek episode than a Star Wars movie, but dang, I still think I would have watched that. I would have been all about it. And in fact, I feel like you get some of that in The Last Jedi. But yeah, maybe it is. I feel like there is a Star Trek episode. Spock's relationship with his own father is very similar. But yeah. Anyway, again, that's
Rich. This is how we keep you on the show with us. This is what we do. We wait till you're here, then we.
Rich, I made a list. I have a whole list of possible Star Trek references I could come up with. Anyway, no, I agree with you. I feel like the difference would be it's a mature character who really believes and knows who she is. Really believes and knows who she is versus a character who doesn't. And Luke doesn't know who he is. And Luke keeps looking to someone to tell him who he is. And that's why the most triumphant moment that Luke has, also possibly the dumbest moment that he has, is when he throws the lightsaber away and says, "I'm a Jedi Knight, the same as my father." Because it's the first time Luke voices an identity. The whole time, Leia knows her identity. Luke's whole character arc is getting to that identity, and getting to that moment where he can say, I'm a Jedi Knight. That said, Yoda did him wrong, because if the last words I would have said instead of "there's another Skywalker," I would have said, "By the way, don't get cocky and throw your lightsaber aside. There's this blue lightning. They can shoot at you, and you can deflect it. You can deflect it,
man. It's a thing.
No one's told you, I think, but seriously, like, don't get cocky and throw away that lightsaber.
Yeah, hold on to that. It might. Tools are always useful. Keep them close by. Oh man, this has been great. Well, before we wrap up, because this has been an awesome conversation, and we'll have some. Hopefully, we got some really good stuff in the hopper coming up. So if you haven't been checking it out, for everyone out there, there's a ton of content that's been coming out. Current books, old books, etc. One of my favorites, at least, I'm not sure if you've been on it, is this War of the Bounty Hunters series. Yeah. It's great because this is actually Marvel 13, but each of the books is basically tracking the same story, which is Boba Fett picked up Han, taking Han to Jabba to collect the bounty, and shenanigans ensue in the middle, and all kinds of stuff is happening. But the great part about it is not just here's all this other stuff that's happening around that relates to that time period. It's actually branching off a lot of new stories. Like I'm not gonna spoil anything here, but in one of the other books that just came out last week, we get to see a character that we've only seen in one movie come back, a mixed sort of anti-hero character come back in a really interesting way and reintroduce a group that we haven't seen in a long time. We've only seen it in a couple different contexts. So it's a really interesting story take because it tells you that this was, again, these stories are not linear paths. Boba Fett picking up Han and taking him to Jabba didn't just cool, jumped into hyperspace. For everybody who's watched one of these movies or TV shows, they don't just get into hyperspace and like in the movie or game, fly for 30 seconds and they're on the other side of the galaxy. That shit takes 12, 13 hours, maybe a day or two. You're flying across a galaxy. I don't care if you're in hyperspace, it takes a long time. So you have to imagine when he picked Han up, it wasn't just, I'm just going to go there. He probably had some other stuff he's got to get done first. No one knows he's got Han, hopefully, and stuff happens to him. So it's interesting. This book series is great. Next week, the next print books in the High Republic series come out. So the Rising Storm comes out next week, and I think the Race to Temple Peak come out, or no, Crash Point Tower. The Race to Crash Point Tower comes out next week. That one is Daniel Jose Older, and the other book, Rising Storm, is Kevin Scott. So those both release next week in the High Republic series. And they just announced today that Star Wars Acolyte, which is basically going to be this live action series that first introduces some new dark side characters or stories that have nothing to do with the Sith. They're just about dark side, and happens at the end of the High Republic era, or like what is the waning days of what is considered to be the High Republic era. So probably of these books have been released, it's a few hundred years after these books are being released, but it's the waning side of the best days of the Jedi. That starts filming in February this next year. So much content is coming out. We got a ton of content. I think the Andor TV show is coming out either later this year or started being filmed. That's going to release sooner than that. I don't remember exactly
really
which.
Excited about that.
Yeah,
really excited about that.
There's just this is the best time to get yourself into Star Wars. And if you're not ready to dip your toe into full books and stuff, the comics, the Star Wars High Republic comics are amazing. These comics are fantastic. But there's all kinds of other books and TV shows and everything going on. So jump in and take a look. There's a lot of really
Star
good
Wars
stuff.
holiday specials on YouTube.
It's awesome. The new one, actually the original holiday special I think is out there too, and the new holiday special, which is actually really good. It's a Lego holiday special.
I swear, I think they built that so that way they could like claim the SEO, so that way that comes up rather than start the original one. And in fact, that was my little joke there. Is that I've shown that to a couple of people, and people are always like, "Oh my gosh, this is insane!" And it's like, that's the original Star Wars TV show. This is such a great time, and I always, and often too, I think you and I have often gotten this question too, like, how do you watch the movies and what order do you watch them? And a thing that I always say to people is watch the one that you're interested in. I know that sounds kind of silly, and some people, oh no, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, or oh no, 1 through 9, do it like that. If you saw something and it grabbed your interest, sit down and watch it. There's a lot of other ways that you can kind of jump into other parts of those stories. And I feel like certain things are so like culturally synonymous now that there's no real way to spoil things. So if you see something that you like, whether it's a movie or a comic book, take a risk. It'll pay off. Mm-hmm. There's so many great ways to start, and you can start thinking about stuff like this, which is, hey, you see a character in that and you think, I wonder if it would have been a little bit different. I wonder if back in those comic book days of Marvel, always used to print those what if comics. This is one of my favorite things to do with you, Jeff, on Kessel Chat, is when we get to play a little bit of what if, and think of different ways that stories could have went.
Yeah, totally. And the thing I remember, or I try to remind myself of these, because I love your comment there. Like, pick whatever the thing is that you are interested in, because stories are not linear. They never are. And that's the fun part about stories. So pick it up wherever. No big deal. Lots of good content coming up. But what? We're not doing that, We're not doing that, Joanna. We're not doing that.
So now we're going into a 2-hour Kessel Chat to talk about what is the one best movie.
But that's for next time. That will have to be for next time.
I can tell you the one you don't need to watch. I can, and you know what? That's a tease. Like we'll jump into that. And Rich is right. You can start with number 2, The Search for Spock in Star Trek. Unless 2001 is your thing, then I would totally recommend Star Trek: The Motion Picture. You stay with the evens there. Don't do the odds.
Yes. Don't do the
odds. In Star Wars, oh my gosh, like. Jeff, I feel like that should be our next episode. Okay. I think we might need to jump into what is the number one.
Thanks, Joanna. See what you did?
Yeah.
You opened up.
What is the number one?
Where's my can of worms? I got to crack that open real quick. Done. All right. Well, we're going to wrap up for tonight. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, bell, all the stuff that's below. It really helps, and we really appreciate it. And again, thank you everyone for subscribing. Like, it's super awesome that we're at the channel's up to. I checked it before the show. We're at 140 subscribers, which is just blows my mind. I never thought we'd hit there, but that is amazing. Thank you all so much. And we do have some news coming up soon. We're going to be switching channels. We've started a new base Kessel Chat channel for YouTube that'll just be for the Kessel Chat, not mixed in with other content I've had in the past. So stay tuned for us moving over there. We'll let you know in advance. But for now, Ryan, it's been a great time, man.
Yeah, as always, this is like my favorite time in the week when we're able to sit down and just kind of talk about Star Wars, and always so great to see some friends and talk this stuff out. And please let us know your ideas for future episodes, because no joke, it's going to be a great next episode. I'm coming with notes for my top pick for a Star Wars movie.
He will have notes. All right, everybody, have a great night. We'll see you soon.
Hey, bye, everybody.